since it's been so long since we've been in the life of Joseph, I made sure I went back and listened to John's sermon of the previous chapter to make sure we're actually, having it be a series, not just a whole bunch of separate sermons. So we hope, though, that you were able to be built up and excited through all our time in Easter, and that you don't think that because Easter's past, we need to slow down. Every day is Easter. Christ is risen every day. So every day I pray that you will go forward in excitement and reach out to the people that are around you. And now, though, we are going to return back to our series on the life of Joseph. So since it's been that 4 weeks, and I'm guessing y'all didn't actually go to the podcast and re-listen to the sermon to catch up on the where we're at in the story, I will do a quick recap so that we're in sequence with the story. The story starts when Jacob, who is Joseph's father, falls in love with Rachel, but his father-in-law tricks him into marrying Rachel's sister first. But then eventually Jacob gets to marry Rachel. But then Leah starts having kids while Rachel is not. So Rachel gives her concubine so that she can have kids through her. Leah stops having kids, so she gives her concubine, and then eventually Rachel actually has some more kids, so they're essentially having a baby-making contest. And that's what leads to a lot of the strife in the rest of the family. So Jacob ends up with 12 sons overall, with only Joseph and Benjamin from Rachel. And then sadly, Rachel dies shortly afterwards. So the woman he actually loved, if you read some of the other things, the only one he really considered a wife is gone. Then her son, Joseph, dreams that his father, this is before she passes, before Benjamin's alive, but he dreams that his father, mother, and brothers will all bow down to him. So in addition to that normal sibling rivalry that exists in every family, and the rivalry between the mothers that had intensified that rivalry anymore, which would have caused many of those sons who are from other mothers to feel like second-class citizens, this already favored one, this one that's already annoying you, goes and says you're going to bow down to him. So it just adds up. It just adds up to where the other brothers hate Joseph. And he comes to check on him one day, and they're like, let's kill him. But instead of that, because they just threw him in a well, I don't think, they're probably just going to let him starve to death down there. But Judah is like, let's make some money off of this. So they sell him to slavers, and then they act like an animal had killed him. So that causes Jacob to be even more protective of Benjamin, to fear even more for him and even dote on him even more. But meanwhile, Joseph finds success in 2 different positions in Egypt, and he is risen to the second most powerful person in the land by God allowing him to interpret the dreams of Pharaoh, predicting that they were going to need to store a surplus from 7 years of goodness to cover the upcoming 7 years of famine. And Pharaoh says, hey, that's a great idea, Joseph. How about you be in charge of it? So that's how he ends up the second most powerful person in Egypt, because he's completely over all of the food. And that famine stretches from beyond just Egypt. It gets up to Canaan as well, and Jacob and his family are starving. So Jacob sends his boys on down to Egypt to buy some food. But since he's so protective of Benjamin, he won't let him go. So when Jacob's sons arrive in Egypt, they see this governor. It ends up is Joseph. They don't have a clue that it's Joseph. I mean, for one thing, Jacob's family would have all had nice epic beards, the one that I can't do because the army makes you shave it every month. But they'd have nice epic beards, while on the other hand, Egyptians can't stand any hair at all. So because he was living as an Egyptian, Joseph would have been completely clean shaven. And you're not going to think it's somebody when you don't expect it to be somebody. There's plenty of times when people are like, hey, how are you doing? And it takes your eyes that second to refocus and be like, oh, that's where I met you before. Okay, you're here now. So they wouldn't have even thought that this brother that they thought they'd killed or sold into slavery would have been the second most powerful person in the kingdom. And then he recognizes them, though they don't recognize him. But he holds no grudge against them. But he wants to know who they've become. So he accuses them of being spies. And then he asks about their father and their other brother. And they're like, how does this guy know this stuff? Like, it's so specific that they're wondering how he knows all of this stuff. But then he takes Simeon captive and says if they want any more food or to get Simeon back, they're going to have to bring their other brother back with them. Yet he returned all the silver they'd brought to pay for the stuff, pay for all of the food. And when they get back home, first of all, they're scared because they don't know why that silver got there. So they're just really happy to get home, period. But then also, Jacob's completely opposed to Benjamin ever leaving his side. But then they starve a bit more. They're closer to death. So Jacob's like, well, okay, fine, go ahead and take him. Though it also required Judah to convince him that he would take Benjamin's place if Benjamin died or anything happened to him. And then when they get back there, they get Simeon back. And then all of a sudden they're given this huge feast. And through all of it, Benjamin is given twice as many things. And then at that feast, he's given 5 times as much food. So they're just confused. I mean, they'd have to be confused. Like, this guy half the time accuses us of being spies. The other time, he's giving us more stuff than we could possibly imagine. So that brings us up to where we're at here now in chapter 44, with the main point of today's sermon being testing will come and you must respond to it with integrity. So in chapter 44, we must remember that it is appropriate to test things. So starting in verse 1. Then he commanded the steward of his house, fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack, and put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, and with his money for the grain. And he did just as Joseph told him. As soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away with their donkeys. They had gone only a short distance from the city. Now Joseph said to his steward, "Up, follow after the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, 'Why have you repaid evil for good? Is it not from this that my Lord drinks, and by this that he practiced divination? You have done evil in doing this.'" Now, Joseph's not just being a troll for the sake of being a troll. He is testing to see if his brothers have truly changed from the guys who sold him into slavery. They'd expressed remorse for it in the previous meeting where he'd overheard it because they didn't have a clue that he spoke their language. But he needed to make sure they were remorseful that they had done it, not just remorseful that bad things were happening to them because they had done it. Because there's a huge difference in those two things. When someone hurts you, it's one thing to forgive them and not hold their sin against them, but it's another thing to rebuild that trust that was broken. For example, I had a friend in college. He disappeared for about a year and a half, dropped out of school, wasn't in contact with anyone. And he comes back to school, so naturally we'd ask him, where have you been? What you been up to? And he said that he'd joined the Army and he'd gone over to Iraq as part of the 82nd Airborne, and his entire division had been wiped out in Fallujah. So he'd received a medical discharge from his injuries. Now, this was pre-Army Glenn, so I just thought, my thought was just, that seems like a division seems like a lot of people to be wiped out and me not have heard about it. And also, he seems kind of twitchy, but maybe that's just his PTSD manifesting itself. And a lot of people did die in Fallujah, so I didn't think it was that many, though. Short story short, it wasn't that many. But I doubted his story, but I didn't worry about it because it really wasn't affecting what was going on. But then he told that story to a lot of people. That was his story, and he stuck to it. But then about a year and a half later, He gathered about 8 of us that were like his closest friends. And he had admitted to us that he'd been lying about that the whole time. He'd just been at home. Like he just dropped out of school, whether it was they'd run out of money, or whether at UNL, where I went to school, if you fail out academically, you have to wait a year to reapply. So I don't remember which of those two it was, but he was just ashamed of what his actual story was. So he made up this bigger, better story. And he asked us for forgiveness for being a habitual liar. I was able to forgive him, but at the same time, there were other people who weren't able to, because that's just your whole story you've been telling is a lie. And even as I tell the story, I realize, as in the Army, Glenn, it's bigger than just being a habitual liar, because stolen valor, or claiming that you did a whole bunch of stuff that other people actually have done, diminishes what they've done. I'm still able to forgive them for it, but now, what is it? I'm old. That was in 2006. So 17 years later, I realized, like even as I was typing this, I was getting mad, because I'm like, oh, that was a lot bigger deal than I thought it was. But the thing is, even though I could forgive him, I would still have to check up on what he was saying to make sure he was telling the truth. It's an Army saying, trust but verify. Like, we'll believe what you're saying, but we're also going to go make, like, oh, you're saying you're going to go get that done. I'm not going to tell you I'm going to check, but I'm going to check that in 2 hours. You know, it's a good purpose in general. But the thing is, you can't trust somebody right away who's broken your trust that much. And no matter what happens, and that's true whether it's habitual lying like that, or whether it's, just, hey, they say they're going to do it and they don't do it. Like when I tell Kelsey I'm going to do the dishes and don't do it, she loses some trust in me. That's true for any of y'all who claim you're going to do anything but don't follow through. But the thing is, Joseph had also forgiven his brothers for selling him to slavery, and they were showing the signs of being better men. So he set up for this test to see if they had truly changed. He put the money back in their packs like he had the time before. And it must have been a custom not to check your bags in front of the guy who gave your stuff. Like if that previous thing had happened, there's no way I would not check my bag to make sure something like that hadn't happened again. But, when someone gives you a birthday card, even if there's a check or bills in there, you act like you didn't see the bill and you read the card first. That's what they were doing. So it probably was a cultural sign of respect not to check their packs. But then for the truest test, he put a silver cup that would have been considered holy as part of the Egyptian religion, and therefore an even bigger affront to steal from him, in Benjamin's bag. The son who his father had wanted to protect so much he didn't even let go along the first time. Also, his only brother of the same mother. So this would have given his brothers of other mothers the opportunity to say, Benjamin messed up. He stole from the man, so we couldn't bring him back. They had opportunity to fully eliminate the favored line. The family rivalry could have been fully decided in favor of the sons not of Rachel. So these brothers could have expected, and probably rightly, that Benjamin would have gotten the greater part of the inheritance. He certainly was the favored son, and the brothers had already gotten rid of the first favored son. So would they seize that opportunity again? So in your lives, take the time to test things, whether it be people, job opportunities, or even asking big things of God. Whenever a leader is looking to see if someone is able to be given more responsibility, don't they give a person a small task and see how they do with it? It should lead to coaching if they fail, or greater responsibility if they succeed, or if they prove to be completely lazy, it should lead to being fired if it's a job. We let them sit in the pew a little bit longer here if they'd completely fail at it, but I don't know of one of y'all that's truly completely failed at anything here yet. But it should, and then also in your dating relationships, there are times when you need to test whether the person you're with is who you want to be with. That's why if you're engaged, any pastors who's worth the title will do premarital counseling with you. And you're going to get asked questions that you wouldn't have thought of on your own, but you need to know the answers to before you marry that person. And another good test is when you meet their family for the first time. Not only is it a test of, can I actually get along with this person's family, but you need to be watching how that person treats other people in their family, particularly how a son treats his mother and how a daughter treats her father, because that's going to show you what they think of the roles in the family. And then it just is a reminder that it is appropriate to test things. So everything is going as good as possible for Joseph, right? That's from the previous sermon, my bad. But Joseph wanted to know for sure, so he sent his servant after them. And that leads to the second point, that you hurt when you are accused of something that you believe you've grown past. So in verse 6, when he overtook them, being the steward, he spoke to them with these words. They said to him, "Why does my Lord speak such words as these? Far be it from your servants to do such a thing. Behold, the money that we found in the mouths of our sacks we brought back to you from the land of Canaan. How then could we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? Whichever of your servants is found with it shall die, and we also will be my Lord's servants." He said, "Let it be as you say. He who is found with it shall be my servant, and the rest of you shall be innocent." Then each man quickly lowered his sack to the ground, and each man opened his sack. And he searched, beginning with the eldest and ending with the youngest. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they tore their clothes, and every man loaded his donkey, and they returned to the city. When Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, he was still there. They fell before him to the ground. Joseph said to them, "What deed is this that you have done? Do you not know that a man like me can indeed practice divination?" And Judah said, "What shall we say to my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how can we clear ourselves? God has found out the guilt of your servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he also in whose hand the cup has been found." But he said, "Far be it from me that I should do so. Only the man in whose hand the cup was found shall be my servant. But as for you, go up in peace to your father." So what do you think Joseph's brothers would have been thinking as they walked away from the house before that? I mean, they mostly would have been relieved, right? Looking at each other like, "Bro, that was crazy. I don't know what this guy's doing. First he accuses us of being spies, and he won't let us see him again without Benjamin. Yeah, hey, Benjamin, how you feeling over after all that food?" Like, "I'm stuffed. I can barely walk." Like, "Yeah, we got Simeon back too. Oh man, this is a lot of food. I can barely carry it, man. My donkey looks like he might break a leg, but it's just enough. Hold on, buddy. And hopefully this is enough that we won't have to come back here. Hopefully this food gets us through the rest of this famine." And this place is weird. That guy is weird. I mean, let's just get home. Hey, wait, isn't that the steward of that governor? Oh man, now what? So then the steward accuses them of stealing from that weird governor they thought they had gotten away from. They had gone to the effort to bring back that silver that was with them the first time. They even convinced their father that Benjamin had to come with them. They had brought gifts above what many others would have brought. So why would they have stolen from the governor? They are so confident that none of them stole it that they make that great declaratory oath that whoever took it would die and the rest of them would be slaves. So they wagered with their lives knowing that they were innocent. Now it's already showing more peaceably how the steward and Joseph want to run things. They're like, "No, whoever stole it will be my slave." Like they say that right at the beginning, but they're willing to wager with their lives that none of them took this. And what probably even stung more is that they used to be the kind of men who would take whatever they wanted to their utmost advantage. Reuben had tried to take over the family by sleeping with one of his father's concubines. Simeon and Levi had promised Shechem that they would be friends with them if they would be circumcised, and yet killed all of them while they were still sore. These things had even caused them to lose the future headship of the family. Now, the first son, Judah, he had refused to protect his daughter-in-law, and then, thinking she was a prostitute, slept with her and got her pregnant, realizing that she was the more righteous one in that situation. He only fulfilled the duties that he was supposed to do to her through her deception and through his own sin. And all of them were complicit in selling Joseph into slavery, even though some wanted him dead, while others wanted to score points with Dad by bringing him back covertly. And then they all lied to their father, claiming he was dead. For however many years that was, they had lied to their father, saying that he was dead. And that's who they were. That's who they were. But they had grown. And now they were doing everything in the honorable fashion with this governor. And the most any accusation hurts is when you know that it's something you would have done in the past, but you're not doing it anymore. You recognize why someone would think that you do that. You know you're fully capable of doing that because you've done it before. And it brings back all the regret of every time that you have done that before. Both the justice of the suspicion and the injustice of the current accusation merge in your soul, and you want to cry out, "That's not me anymore." And then they lay down their sacks, lining up from the oldest to the youngest. Reuben opens a sack, and the silver's there. How'd that get there? Not again. But the steward doesn't care about the silver. Maybe he says a little something about it to keep him nervous. But whatever that might have been is not recorded. Simeon, same thing. Levi, same thing. By number 6, Naphtali, the brothers have to be feeling pretty good about themselves, thinking, see, it wasn't us. Then number 9, Zebulun opens his sack and still silver, but no cup. And surely Benjamin wouldn't have taken the cup. It's not in his character. He was shown so much favor, surely wouldn't have even thought about it. But then Benjamin, the favored, the one their father is worried about, the one that they had to promise safety for, opens his sack, and behold, the silver cup. Our father Joseph will go down to his grave in sorrow. There's no way we can go back without Benjamin. It would be better for us to be slaves here than return to him without Benjamin. So they ripped their clothes in despair and dejectedly walked back to Joseph's house. And all the more they could do when they got there was beg. And Joseph covers for how this setup happened by saying that he can actually do divination. I mean, it's not a lie, but it didn't come through that cup. I mean, God had given him the ability to interpret dreams and the ability to hear from God about the future. Hearing about God for the future is exactly what divination is. So he actually could do divination, but it was not through this cup like the Egyptians would have thought, or like they would have thought, because they had no clue that this guy wasn't just a standard, slightly weird Egyptian. And Judah knows, so there's no defense he can offer. The cup's in the bag. The case is in the bag. God found out their guilt is likely more referring to what they'd done previously, and then God had miraculously put both that silver and the cup in their bags as punishment. But either way, they are caught. They are guilty. The brothers had said if the cup was found, they would be slaves. So Judah tries to be good to their word. Even when it gets them in trouble, they're trying to be good to their word here. But Joseph refused to take them all, setting up the final part of this test. So remember, you hurt the most when you're accused of something that you've grown past. And then you must be bold and stand when you are tested. In verse 18 to the end of the chapter, then Judah went up to him and said, "O my Lord, please let your servant speak a word in my Lord's ears, and let not your anger burn against your servant. For you are like Pharaoh himself. My Lord asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a young brother, the child of his old age. His brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children, and his father loves him. Then you said to your servants, bring him down to me, that I may set my eyes on him. And we said to my Lord, the boy cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. Then you said to your servants, unless the youngest brother comes down with you, you shall not see my face again. When we went back to your servant, my father, we told him the words of my Lord. And when our father said, go again, buy us a little food, we said, we cannot go down. If our youngest brother goes with us, then we will go down. For we cannot see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Then your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One left me, and I said, surely he has been torn to pieces, and I have never seen him since. If you take this one also from me, and harm happens to him, you will bring down my gray hairs in evil to Sheol. Now therefore, as soon as I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, then his life is bound up in the boy's life. As soon as he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. And your servants will bring down the gray hairs of your servant, our father, with sorrow to Sheol. For your servant became a pledge of safety for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father all my life. Now, therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father. So Judah could have let it go, been happy that they were escaping with their freedom. Not to mention, he's who had the most to gain by Benjamin being out of the picture. His older brothers had done things that removed themselves from the line of blessing. And if Jacob's favoritism for his children of Rachel had no more object to fall upon, Judah would receive the double inheritance due to the first son. But he doesn't leave Benjamin to that fate. He doesn't barter a better deal for himself and his brothers as he did when they were getting rid of Joseph. No, he stands up to a governor that could have killed him just for daring to suggest another path. So he does this with very pleasant language. He put on his customer service voice for this one. He did his begging from the government to actually, give them something voice. But he first recounts the first conversation they'd had with Joseph. Remember, we told you our father really loves this kid and relies for him for his will to live. And then tells him what happens when they got home. Their father swore he'd die in sorrow if the boy did not return home. And then he follows through on the pledge he made to their father and offers himself in place of Benjamin. What joy must have exploded in Joseph's heart. Not only had they felt the sorrow for the wrong they had done to Joseph, but the leader of Leah's sons is offering to take the place of her rival Rachel's only remaining son. In the opportunity for a complete matriarchal victory, Judah instead chooses the honorable path of fulfilling his word and honoring his father. Willing to die in the place of one who stood guilty for the sake of his father's well-being. The turnaround was complete. It was proven. Their emotional remorse was turned into self-sacrificial action. This is the proof that someone has repented. Courage to stand when they are tested to do the self-sacrificial thing. So remember, you must be bold to stand when you are tested. So what should we do in light of this? We need to remember it is appropriate to test things. Whether people, job opportunities, are asking God for big things, it is good to know where you stand with people, so testing their character and responses is good. Granted, don't overdo it. You're just going to be seen as that suspicious person that's always trying to have a person prove their friendship to them. But in work and ministry settings, giving people opportunities to succeed or fail lead to opportunities to coach or mentor them. And if they prove able, you can give them more opportunities. Meanwhile, being tested, so we're all going to be tested. Being tested gives the ability to prove who you are and find out what you still need to work on. And most importantly, every test is an opportunity to rely more on God. And when you are accused of something you did before but are no longer doing it, it's going to hurt. The best medicine in those situations is to continue not to do whatever it is you used to do. As long as you can stand in your integrity, you at least have that, even if you're being accused of things that you are not doing. And you can only convince people that you are no longer who that person was by standing in your integrity and walking in the path of righteousness. And if you have evidence that it wasn't you, well, that's good as well. It shortens how long you have to prove it, but keep proving it anyway. But it's also hard to prove a negative. So it's really hard to say, like, see, I didn't do this, unless you have something like, see, here's who did it. And then sometimes that circumstantial evidence might even be pointing at you having done what you are accused of. But remember, God sees all and knows your growth. He knows your heart. And all of that leads to the final application. You must be bold to stand when you are tested. Whatever you are tested with, you must stand boldly upon God's truth and righteousness. If someone's challenging your integrity, you must stand in it. If you're being tempted to do things that are against God, you must stand against it and not give in. And there will be times that you will need to stand in someone's place because they are not able to get out of the situation themselves. Now, for some of you, you haven't tested anything in a while. There's a lot of people that are scared of things right now, whether that goes back to COVID or you've had bad experiences with people or with work or anything, whatever that is that's causing the fear that you're shrinking from. You need to stand against that fear and be willing to ask God for big things. Are you in a relationship that you need God to heal? Test and see that He is good to heal it. Granted, you're also going to need to see what of those problems you're contributing to it. As nearly every relationship problem, it's both people doing stuff. So do you want to see a person you love come to Christ? Test their heart by sharing with them and test if God will bring them to Himself. Meanwhile, some of you haven't been standing up well to how you've been being tested. You have to lean hard into God for your strength because you do not have strength enough to conquer these things on your own. Even David, when he faced Goliath, did not rely on his own strength. He relied on God's strength. So even David, even though he was accurate, did not slay Goliath. God slayed Goliath. And God is willing to provide your strength in those situations. He is the only true source for strength, and every test is an opportunity to rely on Him more. And He proves this in that a descendant of Judah would offer himself to take the place not just of his half-brother from a single sin that could have killed him, but Jesus, the Lion of Judah, the Messiah, the Son of God, died for those who would become His adopted brothers and sisters. Not just for one sin, but for every sin they've ever committed. And as Judah was trying to get Benjamin back to his father, Jesus has opened the way for us to have a relationship with God the Father. And if you have not accepted Him as the only way to God, you can do that now. So if you would like prayer for any of these, or if you've accepted Christ lately, or you want more instruction on any of that, please talk to John or myself, whoever you came with today. Now let me close us in prayer. Father God, we thank You. We thank You that You have given us the example of Joseph and his brothers, the example of change for Joseph's brothers, that they went from these people that would do the most wicked things of getting rid of their brother for some cash and all the other things that they did, to those who would stand in place of their other brother that had the same rivalry. Maybe wasn't as obnoxious, but he definitely stood in the way in the same way that Joseph did. Lord, I thank You that You are the one who is able to create that change. Lord, I thank You that You sent Jesus to also be our substitute for us so that we could come to You, Father. Without that, there is no way for us, there is no hope for us, and there is no purpose for us. I thank You for who You are, and I pray that You will bring these examples into our hearts so that we will be able to stand boldly when we are tested. We ask this all in Your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.